In this video, we're going to continue to learn about the if statement. There is a bit more to it than what we've covered so far. To mess around with this, let's create a brand new file in the basics directory, and I'm going to call this one boolean-advanced.js. For this example, let's start off with a variable is account locked. And let's pretend we're making some sort of account management software, and we'll set it equal to true. So for this particular user, the account is indeed locked. This data might come back from a database or somewhere else. Now, if we wanted to print a message when the account is locked, we know how to do that. If right here is account locked, we then, inside of curly braces, set up the message we want to print. Console.log is account locked. Awesome. Now, what if the account isn't locked? Right now, we don't have a way to get that done. We know that if this condition is true, this code runs. If the condition is not true, this code doesn't run. But with if statements, we actually have the ability to add on an optional else clause. That lets us provide some code to execute if the condition is false. So in this case, to create an else clause, we would, right after the closing curly brace, type else, followed by another set of curly braces, creating another code block. So if the condition is true, run this code block, otherwise run this code block. And as I mentioned, else is completely optional. We created plenty of completely valid if statements without using else at all. In here, we can now do something when the account is not locked. Console.log welcome, for example, welcoming the user whose account is indeed unlocked. Let's go ahead and test our work. Over in the terminal, we can run this brand new file, node boolean-advanced.js. When I run the script, I get account is locked, which is indeed expected since this is true. Let's switch it over to false and see what we get. I'm going to save the script, rerun it, and we get welcome. Using the else clause, we're going to be able to provide a fallback. So if the condition doesn't pass, we're going to have the option to do something else entirely. Now, once again, not all of your if statements are going to justify an else clause, but there are a lot of situations where we either want to do one thing or another thing. And with if else, we can get that done. There is one more optional clause we can add into our if statements. Right now we have the regular if statement, we have the optional else clause. There's also the optional else if clause. And to figure out why something like that would be useful, let's look at the following example. Based off of this code, only one of these code blocks will ever run, but one will always run. That means that we're never going to have neither of these messages print, but we're also never going to have both of them print. Now this allows us to go down two different roads. We can go down road A, or we can go down road B. But what if there was three different roads we might want to go down? What if we might want to go down A, we might want to go down B, or we might want to go down C? Well, using what we already know, we don't have a way to get that done. To talk about why that is, let's go ahead and introduce a second variable into the mix. Let user role. And let's say that user role is just a string and it stores the user's role. We either have a generic user or we have someone with special privileges, and for them, we'll have a user role of admin. And now imagine the application we're creating is going to show these messages to the user in the browser, for example. We might want to show them is account locked. We might want to show them welcome, but for admins, we want to show them welcome admin. Right now, there is no way to get that done. Yes, we could add another if statement down below, but that's completely irrelevant because one of the two pieces of code above are going to run no matter what, which means that best case scenario, we get two messages printing, and that's not what we want. So there is nothing we can do down below to prevent either of these from running. What we're going to do instead is use the else if clause. So let's take a look at that in isolation, and then we'll integrate it up above to this real example. It starts off with an if statement, like always, and we put our condition in. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to stick with actual typed out Booleans. So in this case, let's say true. What do we know about this? We know this code will always run. Now let's integrate a second road right here, else. What do we know about this? We know this code will never run because of the condition specified up above. To add an else if, we put it right here after the if and before the else. So that looks a little bit like this. I'm going to type in else if. I'm going to add some parentheses, and I'm going to add some curly braces. Now, right inside of these curly braces, I'm going to hit enter, and this is the structure for an if statement that also has an else if condition. What do we put inside of these parentheses? We put in our other condition. For now, let's go ahead and say it's true. Now that we have an else if and an else, we have three roads we can go down: road A, road B, and road C. Based off of these values, which road are we going to pick? We're going to go down A. Once we find the first passing condition, we stop. This one passes, this code runs, the other two pieces of code never run. If this was false, we would check this condition, it wouldn't run, so we would check this condition. This condition would run, and we would go down road B. And in the final scenario, both of these conditions would be false. So we check this condition, it's false, this code doesn't run. We check this condition, it's false, this code doesn't run. Finally, we have else, and that allows us to go down one of three roads. This is going to fix the problem that we just explored up above. Now, it's important to note that you can use else, you can use else if. They're both completely optional, which means that I could use else if without else if I wanted to. This is a perfectly valid if statement, and we'll see situations later in the course where it makes sense to use something like that. For the moment, though, let's go ahead and stick with all three. So what's the first thing we're going to check? Well, we are trying to split between those two greetings, but we're always going to print the same message if their account is locked. So let's start there. Is the account locked? If the account is locked, we don't care about anything else. We're going to print the message and print nothing else. And we already have that message. So we can just take this line, copy it, and paste it right in. Next up, what are we going to put inside of here? Well, in here, we're going to check the user role using the equality operator. So is the user role equal to, using triple equals, the string admin? If it is, great, this code will run. If it's not, that's fine too. We'll move on to the else clause where we have the generic greeting. So right inside of here, console.log, welcome admin. Now down below, inside of else, console.log welcome. Now we have one of three roads we're going to go down. One of these is always going to run, but only one. We're never going to have 0 run. We're never going to have 2 or 3 run. We can delete the old if statement from up above, and we can actually test our work. So with the current data, the account isn't locked, but they are an admin. So I would expect welcome admin to print. I can rerun the script, and that is exactly what I get. Let's go ahead and change the user role over to user. Now this condition is going to be false. It'll continue down to the generic greeting, and if I rerun the script, once again, I do get welcome. So using the optional else and else if clauses, we can create more complex conditionals in our programs. And now let's create a more advanced version of our little temperature warning app over here. In this case, we say it's freezing outside. In this case, we say it's way too hot outside, but what if it's right in the middle? Then it's probably pretty fine to go outside as long as you got maybe a jacket or a t-shirt. So let's add in a third row where we say it's fine, go outside. That's what you're going to do over here as the challenge for this video. Down below, I'll create a little challenge area. And you are going to start with a temp variable, which I will give you. 45 would be a good medium temperature. And you're going to have one of three situations occur. 3 different messages, only one's ever going to print. It's freezing outside. It's hot outside. Or the final one, go for it. It is pretty nice. So we want to set up an if statement with an else if and else clause to make sure we hit all 3 scenarios. It's going to be your job to actually create this if statement with else if and else, and then test your work. For a temperature of 45, I would expect go for it. It's pretty nice out to print. If it was 31, I would expect it's freezing outside. If it was 120, I would expect it's hot outside. Take some time to create this if statement and then test your work. Run the program, switch around the value, and make sure you see the different message as the value changes. All right, pause the video, and when you're done, click play. How'd that one go? I'm going to kick things off by checking if it's freezing outside. We'll start there. If the temperature is less than or equal to 32 degrees. Maybe you did less than, not less than or equal to. That's okay. We can go ahead and toss on what we want to do in that case. And all of these are just messages. It's really all we know how to do for the moment. So console.log, it is freezing outside. Excellent. Now down below, we want to check something else. We want to check if it's too hot outside. And we're going to be using an else if for that because there's a specific condition we want to set up. If we just set up else, it would run when it's not freezing outside. But we want to specifically check if it's 110 degrees or greater. Right here, else if. We set up our condition, we set up our code block. In that condition, we are going to check if the temperature is greater than or equal to 110 degrees. In that case, console.log, it is hot outside. Excellent. Now we have both of those in place. And what's the last thing we want to do? It's just to have a fallback. If it's not freezing and it's not hot, it must be just fine. Right here, we'll put that. Console.log, a little message, go for it. It is pretty nice out. Excellent. So there we have it. This is all we needed to do to create an if statement that allows us to go down one of three paths. It's either freezing, it's too hot, or it's just right. I'm going to save Boolean Advanced and run the program. This time around, I would expect to see that go for it message, since 45 degrees is right in the middle. This condition fails, this code doesn't run. This condition fails, this code doesn't run, we fall back to else. Now let's switch it up to 450 degrees. In that case, I would expect to see it's too hot outside. Over here, that's exactly what we get. And that's because this condition fails, this code doesn't run. This condition passes, this code runs, and then we stop looking at the rest of the if-else clauses. Next up, a freezing temperature. Let's go ahead and use 4. In this case, we can run the script and make sure we get the correct result, and we do, it's freezing outside. This condition passes, so we run the code and we stop checking the other conditions down below. So there we have it, a slightly more advanced if statement from what we explored in the past, and this is going to give us a bit more flexibility when creating our JavaScript applications. That's where we're going to stop for this one. I'll see you in the next video.